Mondays with Mark Allen. Today, I am with one of the most amazing human beings on the planet, Dave McGillivray. Dave, so great to see you. Welcome to Mondays with Mark Allen.
Mark, when you say you're with one of the most amazing people on the planet, you must be looking in the mirror.
Well,
you're that person, not me, but I'm flattered and honored and thank you. It's very kind of you.
No, in case you think he's, that I'm exaggerating, here's just a list of things. In 2000, he was chosen as Race Director of the Year by Road Race Management and Running Times Magazine. You received the Lifetime Achievement Award by Competitor Magazine for over 30 years of service in sport and road race and triathlon. 2005, you were inducted into the Running USA's Hall of Fame. Don't go away, everybody. A few more to go. You were named Hero of Running by Runner's World magazine. You're awarded the prestigious Jimmy Award from the Jimmy Fund of Boston for 30 years of raising money to fund cancer research in the area. 2011, inducted into the USA Triathlon Hall of Fame. Number 6 on the list of 50 most influential people in running ever. You received the recipient of the Marathon Photo Road Race Management Lifetime Achievement Award, inducted into the Road Runners Club of America Long Distance Running Hall of Fame, along with a couple other, not too shabby people, Ryan Hall, Desiree Linden, and George Hirsch. So, I mean, you're amazing. You're just amazing.
It just means I'm old. As you get older, these things kind of just add up. No, all kidding aside, each and every one of them, I'm honored and flattered, and it means a lot. And, the tough part about getting these awards is you got to find places where you can display them because you want to be respectful of the organization that gave it to you. But sometimes you just run out of wall space, and, but it's so, I've always said that, you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. And there's no such thing as an individual award, accomplishment, or achievement. So, anytime I receive something, like a lot of people say, it's because of the people you surround yourself with.
Well, clearly you have a good team around you. You have for years. One of the things I'd love to talk about today is that this year is going to be your 50th running of the Boston Marathon. How wild is that?
Yeah, it is wild because the first time I ran it, I didn't finish. And I thought, that's it, I'm done. But I vowed to come back the next year. So that was in 72. But for me, I was a senior in high school, 17 years old. I really had no business jumping into the race, but it was just one of those things where I felt compelled that I want to give it a go. But I didn't do one thing, and that was I didn't earn the right to do it. And so I bailed in the hills of Newton, Heartbreak Hill, got taken to the Newton Wellesley Hospital in an ambulance. Finally got home and decided I'm going to do it next year. Officially turned 18, and I was able to get it done. And when I finished, I said to myself, I'm going to run this race every year for the rest of my life. And I can't believe it's been 50 years since I said that. And here we are, banging on the door a few weeks ago for the 126th Boston Marathon, but my 50th.
And there's a little backstory to that first finish. Tell me, what was the real inspiration for you to pitch up and make it to that finish line in your second attempt?
So what happened is my grandfather had always been a supporter of my athleticism. And when I decided to run it in 72, I called him and I said, I'm going to run the marathon. He said, I'll meet you at the 24-mile point, because he lived right across the street from the course. But I never made it there. And then by the time I got home, I called him and he didn't answer. I called him again, he didn't answer. Finally, 9 o'clock at night, he answers the phone. I said, Grandpa, where have you been? He said, Dave, where have you been? I've been waiting here all night for you. The old man, Kelly, goes by, the street sweepers go by, no Dave. And I said, yeah, I know, I quit. He said, you what? I said, I failed. He said, no, you didn't quit. And I said, no, what'd I do? He said, you learned. I said, what'd I learn? So you learn you cannot go along in life and set reckless goals. you had no business being in that race. You know that. I said, yeah, you're right. And he said, I'll cut another deal. I said, what? He said, now you train for it, and I'll be waiting for you next year. I said, okay, deal. Well, I just went crazy, right? 18 years old, I was running 120, 130 a week, training with all the hot shots around here in Boston. And I was ready to go. And the day before I got sick, my parents said, you can't run. I said, I have to run. The newspapers are saying, Dave, running in memory of grandfather. And when you're too sick, I said, can you give me something that very few other people have ever given to me in my life? They said, what's that? I said, a chance.
Because he had passed, right? Your grandpa passed.
He died. My grandfather died 2 months after he had said he was going to be there. And so I said, I want to do it in memory of grandpa. So they said, okay, fine. And they brought me out to the start. I started running, and it was terrible. I mean, 5 miles, I was ready to cash it in, but just kept going, and finally got to the hills where I dropped out the year before and doing the survivor shuffle over the hills. And it just wasn't pretty. And finally at 21.5, boom, down I go again. So here I drop out of my first Boston. I drop out of my second Boston. I'm thinking, this wasn't meant to be. I wasn't meant to be a marathoner. And all of a sudden, a defining moment in my life occurred where I turned around. I said, this place looks a little familiar. And as I looked behind me, I saw a sign that says Evergreen Cemetery. And I remembered that's where they buried my grandfather. And there's his tombstone right there. I could see it from the road. And that son of a gun said he'd be there. Now, he wasn't there physically, but maybe spiritually he was, and he kept his end of the deal. And I just said, I got to keep my end of the deal. So I picked myself up and I finished in 4.5 hours. And that's when I said, I'm going to run this race for the rest of my life in honor and in tribute of the lesson my grandfather taught me about earning the right to do things. And I've run 165 marathons since, and haven't dropped out of any other one, since the first one.
That's amazing. And so many stories in sport are like that. You start out, you have this goal, this dream, you think you can do it. And then all of a sudden you think, I can't do it, and it's not for me. And, I did that 6 times in Kona. I'm like, this isn't for me. And I was ready to drop. But at the same time, similar, I had that goal, like, I have to go there and just finish it the right way. And so that was the start of your that was your first of 50. Well, yes. First of 49 that have been completed.
Yeah.
Was there ever a point where people were kind of like, what are you doing? You're doing this every year. When did it go from kind of maybe being like a quirk in your character to people realizing, wait a minute, this is building the strength of your character?
Yeah. Well, the intent really wasn't to try to run the most Boston marathons of anybody. That's 58 by old Johnny Kelly, who won the race twice and finished second 7 times. Interestingly, Johnny was born in Medford, Mass, where I was born, and his PR is almost to the second. His PR is 2:30 flat. Mine's 2:29:58. And but I never won Boston or finished second 7 times. But I became true friends with him. And I remember I finished the race one year, and I saw him in the lobby of the hotel, and he come up to me and he says, hey, how'd you do? And I said, oh, pretty good. And what number is this? I said, I don't know, 38, 39. He goes, well, you're going to break my record, and I'm not going to be alive to see it. But, I know you're the one. And that resonated in my head. But not that I ever said I'm going after that record, because it just seemed to be something that was an impossibility. But I ran it for 15 years in a row, and then I got offered the job to, help manage it, help direct it. And it was a really hard decision to make, because from a professional event management perspective, I had just started my business, and to have the crown jewel in my portfolio of events would really help catapult my business. And so how can I walk away from this opportunity? At the same time, I said, I was going to run this race every year for the rest of my life. So how do I do both? And I said, well, I'm just going to take the job and try to figure this thing out. So I took the position as technical director. And that day, 1988, I was standing at the finish line, high-fiving everyone. And even though I felt great that the race had come off really well, I felt like an emptiness in my gut that I hadn't run. And all these people are crossing the finish line, and I'm not a really great spectator. You know, I need to be in the game. So I tapped a state police trooper on the shoulder and I said, "Officer, you do me a favor." He said, "What?" I said, "Will you drive me back to the start?" He goes, "Why, did you forget something?" I go, "Yeah, I forgot to run." So he drove me back at 8 o'clock at night, and I ran the whole thing by myself, finished a little after 11 at night. I was the last finisher of, you know, my own race. And I've been the last finisher for the last 34 years. And so this will be an incredible celebration. It'll be my 35th, you know, basically running at night. There's a couple of glitches there with the virtual year and then the bombing year. Those are interesting stories. And then, but this will be, you know, number 35 since I've been directing the race.
Wow, pretty amazing. You made it happen. Didn't matter if you're a race director or not. You still kept that streak alive, kept your vision alive. Take us back to 2013. I will never forget this. I was actually on the Big Island of Hawaii, ready to go give a corporate talk. And I got a call from a friend of mine, close friend who lives in Maryland. And she said, "Turn on the TV. You won't believe what's happening in Boston."
Wow. And
I turned it on and I couldn't believe what was happening in Boston.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, the year before, 2012, it was the hot year, and it was almost 90 degrees the whole day, and, you know, carnage everywhere, right? And we, you know, 2,500 people, you know, treated in the medical tent, 250 transported to hospitals. It was bad. And so 2013 came, and it was a glorious day. It was great. And so I thought, okay, we got a good one here. And I get to the start. And the first thing I did was we had a 26-second moment of silence for the 26 victims of the Sandy Hook tragedy. And interestingly, you know, about 8 hours later, 26 miles away from where I was standing, we would be experiencing our own tragedy. But the day was great. You know, the starts went well. I rode the lead vehicle, got to the finish. Everything was great. Went and hugged my kids in the bleachers, my wife, went into the medical tent. Everything was fine, only a couple of people. Then I decided, okay, as the day wore on, I said, I'm going to head back out to do my run. And I got back out to the start, and I'm standing on the starting line. I had state troopers with me to escort me, and my phone rings. And similar to you, I was told, you know, that there were 2 explosions at the finish line, and I needed to get back there. So we went back there 100 miles an hour down the Mass Turnpike, got back to Boston in 20 minutes, get into the area that had been totally evacuated. And the first thing I did was go in the medical tent. And only a couple of hours earlier, I went in there and there was no business. And then I went in there and the place was jammed, but not of runners. But I couldn't do anything, obviously, in the medical tent. So I left and went to try to find my own family because I didn't know if they were impacted by the bombing because they were sitting right in the bleachers. But they wouldn't let me up to the finish line to even look for them because it was a crime scene. So I went and I just tried to help everyone else out, 6,500 runners who would get stopped, and tried to get them their gear bags back. And again, it was really hard because we're asking volunteers to help us, but we didn't know whether there were other devices in the immediate area that could go off and, you know, kill people. So it was hard to both help people, but also protect your own life because you didn't know what was going on. But eventually things settled down. And about 5 days later, when the feds gave us back the finish line in Boylston Street, I decided to sneak out, not tell anyone, and run the course. So I did, and I finished. And so I didn't run it at night, but I ran it 4 or 5 days later. So so they kept that streak alive, but it was just unfinished business that I needed to deal with. And then in 2020, when we had the virtual, so the race was initially postponed till the fall, but then eventually canceled. But because every year I get up on Patriots Day and run a marathon, I ran a marathon on Patriots Day around my neighborhood.
Hmm.
And then we had the virtual to actually count as an official Boston Marathon, but we were told not to run it on the course. So I ran that in my neighborhood. So that's virtual number 2.
Hmm.
And then a week later, I was like, wait a minute, I've run the marathon course every year for the last 47 years. So I got my car, drove to the start and ran the marathon course. So I ran 3 virtual marathons in 2020. Only one counts, but just, I don't know. It's the way our head works, I guess. I'm a street freak, I guess.
Hey, you're kind of a rebel. You're going against the grain there and getting it done. You're getting the job done. What would be, looking back at 2013 and even 2020, what are some of the lessons you learned as far as just picking up the pieces and keeping going with the event, with what you had envisioned for yourself for running it?
Well, my motto has been, and we can talk about it for a second, ever since my surgery, I truly do believe that the comeback is always stronger than the setback, right? And you just got to wrap your arms around the immediate and deal with the impact, but then you need to pick up the pieces and move on. And that's what happened, in 213, tragedy, but 214 was epic. Meb wins. He's got the names of the victims on his bib number. Who would have thought? And it was interesting. He and I went out to dinner a couple of days before the race, and we're walking back to the hotel. And I said, do you mind just telling me what your strategy is going to be for Monday? And he told me, and I'm on the lead motor scooter, and he did exactly what he said he was going to do. And I was the only one that knew it. And he had a big gap over a minute, and then it went down to like 7 seconds, and everyone's thinking he's gonna get caught. And I said, nope, he's not gonna get caught. He's gonna make that 90-degree turn, and he's gonna put the hammer down and gap it and discourage the guy behind him. And he did. And it was just fascinating to watch that whole thing. But the fact that we came back from the tragedy, we had 9,000 more people. It was great. The comeback was definitely stronger than maybe what the setback would have been. And I think the same thing with the pandemic. We had an event in October, but now we have the full event in April. 30,000 people, best athletes in the world come in. I mean, we're ready to go. So yeah, I mean, it's just more of an attitude than anything else.
That's a good one to remember, everybody. The comeback is always stronger than the setback. That's what a mantra to go through life living by. You had a setback in 2019. You just threw it out there, heart surgery. Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah. So, a lot of us, Mark, we have this tendency of thinking we've done all these endurance things that we're somewhat bulletproof or invincible. And in 213, that was a bad year for me and a lot of people. I was out running, back, in October, and could feel some difficulty in my chest and difficulty breathing. And I'm like, I don't know, did I eat something last night that didn't settle with me? I don't know. And it just persisted and persisted. And, I wasn't in denial, but I wasn't thinking it was anything too significant, but it persisted. So I said, I better check this out, and went to Mass General Hospital, and they did all these tests, EKGs, echocardiogram, pulmonary tests, check the heart, check the lung, check all this. They all said the same thing. There's nothing wrong with you. I said, yes, there is. I can't breathe when I'm running. So I know my body. I know what I can do. I know something's wrong. You got to give me the big boy tests. Look under the hood here. So they did, and they did a CAT scan, saw some calcification. They did an angiogram, and the doctor comes in and he goes, there, and there. I said, there what? Because you have severe coronary artery disease. I said, no, really, what's going on? He goes, no, you do. You have severe coronary artery disease. I said, I can't. I've done all these things. He says, well, you do. I said, well, how'd that happen? Was it genetics or was it self-inflicted? And he goes, I don't know. Only you know. And I said, it was probably a little of both. I said, I do have heart illness in my family, and I probably broke some rules in the past. I don't sleep that much. I think sleep's overrated. I want to get as much out of every day as I can. So, wrong. And stress, I've just been through a lot of stress, and that's part of it. And, diet. I mean, I'm good, but I'm not great. I could make some changes. So I said to him, I got one question to ask you. He said, what? I said, is this reversible? He said, it depends. I said, depends on what? He said, depends on the person. I said, well, you're looking at him. I'm over here. And he said, yeah, I think you can have an impact on your own illness. And I said, okay, sign me up. I changed everything, right? So my diet, nutrition, what I ate, when I ate, how I ate, sleep, stress, everything. I lowered my cholesterol level by over 100 points. I lost 27 pounds when I didn't have it to lose, but I did. And I called up the Ironman and I said, hey, I'd like to have a magnet, a target. I need a target. I said, what do you think? Can I come back? And they said, yeah, but you got to get a note from your doctor. I said, what? A note from my doctor? I've never been asked for a note from my doctor. They said, well, we heard about you and we don't want you going down in the lava fields on us. I said, all right. So I called my doctor. I said, can I get a note to do the Ironman? He said, no. I said, why no? He says, you're not going down on my watch either. I said, well, what does it take? He says, let's get you back in here and do another angiogram. I said, all right, we did. And I had reversed my own coronary artery disease by over 40%. Here's your note. And that's when I went back to Hawaii in 2014 and did my 9th. I hadn't done it for 25 years, but I needed something to go after just to keep me honest. And so I did it. And then for 15 and 16, I learned a valuable lesson when I turned 60, and that is just because you're fit doesn't mean you're healthy. And I always thought it did. And I was wrong, and it almost got me. And I have 7, 8 friends of mine who were 220, 218 marathoners who went out for a run one day, and I could name them personally, who went out for a run one day and never come home. Just they were either in denial or tried to push too hard and didn't understand the warnings, wanting pain, challenging pain. There's a distinction between the two. Challenging pain, go for it. Wanting pain, time out. And people sometimes can't interpret them properly. Well, I did, and it saved my life, right? So I trained like crazy, and I was winning all these triathlons and everything else and doing great. And then I went and did the World Marathon Challenge, 7 marathons, 7 days, 7 continents. And, and the running part of it was okay. The rat race in between was hard, and I got home from that, and that was in 2018. And then all of a sudden I could feel some difficulty in my chest again. I said, what the heck? So then I went back to Mass General, and they said, you got 95% blockage in your main artery. I said, how did that happen? I thought I beat this. They said, you can't run away from your genetics. I fixed one part of it. That was self-inflicted, and that which I could control. But the genetics, it's the card I was dealt. I said, well, what are my options? And he said, well, you can do nothing, but you have to live a sedentary life. I said, cross that off.
Right.
He said, we can stent it, but it's really close to your heart and it's relatively risky. I said, nah, you're not going to mess around with my heart. Let's forget that one. And the third one is open heart surgery. And I said, nah, I don't like that one either. He says, well, you've run out of options. I said, okay, I have a question to ask you. He said, what? I said, this little race in April in Boston, it's 6 months away. I've shuffled through it 2 or 3 times. What do you think? And he gave me the best possible answer. He didn't say, no, I don't think you can do it, or yes, I think you can. He said, I'd be extremely disappointed if you couldn't do it. I said, really? And it gave me that 4-letter word that I needed at that moment, and that is hope. I could have this surgery and still run the marathon. Holy cow. But I did put it in its proper perspective. I do have my priorities in order, even though certain things are important to me. The race is a road race. It's an important one, but it's still a road race versus my life. And so I had the surgery, open heart, triple bypass surgery. And 4 days later, I was out of the hospital. But right prior to it, I set the record in the cardiac ward for walking with a walker, the 1 mile, 1 mile walk around the cardiac ward in my walker. I said, okay, road to recovery, I'm getting there. And so it was it was really hard because I said to my heart surgeon, well, what's my routine? He goes, I don't know. He says, I never operated on anyone like you. I said, really? So what do I do? He said, you got to talk to other people who are in a similar place as you, or you just got to figure it out on your own. I said, all right, I'll figure it out on my own. So it's a delicate balance between recovering and training. So my first training was walk a mile around the neighborhood after you get out of the reclining chair, and then walk 2 miles, and then jog 2 miles, and then jog 2 miles, and then jog a little more, and then run a little bit, and then eventually, get to the point where you think you can cover 26.2. And 6 months later, I did it, 26.2. And that was in 2019. So that was the last one before the pandemic. And then I did the virtual in 20, and then 21 October, I did my 49th.
That's amazing. You were an opportunist, taking advantage of that walker in the hospital, setting the record while you're in there. No, who cares? I just had that surgery. I'm going to set some kind
everything's
of
relative, Mark. Everything's relative, right?
Yeah.
Put it in its proper perspective. I want to get that record before I get out of here.
And there really are very few people like you, and probably the doctors and the medical profession. Yeah, you have a genetic component. Tim O'Donnell, same thing. He had a heart attack in a race, purely a genetic component. He has the little LDL particles, not big ones, and so they get stuck in the veins. And his whole family has that type of heart disease. There's not much you can do about that other than manage it. But fortunately, you didn't ignore it. And that's
I didn't ignore it.
The main thing.
So that's my whole. Like you, I do a lot of corporate talks. I've talked to I've done over 1,900 of them. Corporate, every conceivable type of group you can imagine, from kindergartens, high schools, colleges, business groups, sales forces, inside maximum security prisons, blah, blah, blah. And basically, just right now, my main thrust is about awareness. In Massachusetts, there's a public safety campaign that says, if you see something, say something. My campaign now is, if you feel something, say something. Right? I always thought in the early years when I was training and doing all these crazy things, running across the country and all this foolishness, that it was somewhat selfish. And as I got older, I said, something, it's just the opposite. It's unselfish to take care of yourself, because then you don't burden anyone else to have to take care of you for you. And you put yourself in a better position to help those who need your help. So the most important person on the planet is you. And you have an obligation and responsibility to take care of yourself. And, that's why I love the endurance world and athletics and marathoning and all that, because people are very focused on their own health, which I think is very, very unselfish.
What a great message for everybody. Take care of yourself first, and then you can take care of others.
Exactly.
Yeah, Dave, there's one question I've just wanted to ask you before we go here.
Yeah.
You have so many accomplishments. You've done so much, 50th marathon, Boston Marathon coming up this year, race director, 35 years, 9 Ironmans, 7 continents, marathons. But those are probably, what is the thing that you are most proud of in your life?
Giving back. Giving back. I just feel I was put on this planet to have an impact in other people's lives. And, through my company, DMSC Sports, myself, we've raised $200 million for various causes. It's funny, Mark, when I was a young boy, I wanted to be a professional athlete, but I was short in stature, so I kept getting cut. And I remember I was working in the John Hancock Tower at the time in Boston. I saw Fenway Park. I saw a sign out in right field. Sign said, "Help make a dream come true, support the Jimmy Fund." I knew that Jimmy Fund was the fundraising arm of the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. So I went and I visited with those kids, and I saw them. And there was a sign in the Jimmy Fund clinic, and a sign said, "God made only so many perfect heads. The rest of them have hair on it." And it just made me realize about turning negatives into a positive. And these kids have courage and guts. They want a will to live. They want to live, but they need help. And, and I just knew that the battle that I was about to fight by running over 5.5 million footsteps across America was in no way as difficult as the battle that these kids are fighting for their own life. And so I just felt like, that's been my mission, my entire life, and to try to give back to those who need who need our help.
Well, there was no hesitation in that answer, giving back. Amazing, Dave. Congratulations on everything you have done. Good luck in everything you have coming up. Thanks for stopping by today.
Thank you, Mark. You're an inspiration to me.
Oh, you're kind. Mondays with Mark Allen. I hope you enjoyed that. I am inspired. I'm going to go out and I'm going to go work out right now. Have a great day, everybody.